My husband kicked me out after believing his nephew's lies, slamming the door without a second glance. But once the truth surfaced in our divorce, the betrayal he trusted most became the thing that destroyed him. Hey Reddit, I'm Miriam, 40, a teacher, and until recently, a step-aunt by marriage. We lived in Rosario, Argentina, in a modest, single-story house on a quiet street where everyone knew everyone's business, and gossip traveled faster than the river itself. The kind of street where you could smell your neighbor's asado on a Sunday afternoon, and the distant sound of the Paraná riverboats was a constant hum. Our house, with its pale yellow walls and small, neat garden, felt like a haven, or at least it used to. For years, my life with my husband, Rafael, was normal, or what I thought was normal. We'd have coffee on the patio in the mornings, sometimes share a quiet dinner, and I'd spend my days teaching history to teenagers, trying to ignite a spark of curiosity in them. Rafael was the kind of man who always put his family first, above everything, and often above me. It wasn't malicious, not overtly, but it was a quiet, constant pressure. If his elderly aunt needed a ride to the doctor, our plans were instantly canceled. If a cousin had a minor crisis, he'd drop everything. I always told myself it was admirable, this unwavering loyalty, this deep sense of familial duty, but sometimes it felt like I was an afterthought, a convenient accessory to his larger family tapestry, rather than an integral part of our own small unit. My needs often felt secondary, brushed aside with a gentle pat on my hand and a, "You understand me, amor." And I always did, or at least I pretended to. I valued peace, you know? Then there was his nephew, Nicholas. He's 22, charming as hell with a dimpled smile that could disarm anyone, but always seemed to be a screw-up who landed on his feet at other people's expense. Nico was Raphael's golden boy, despite a string of minor troubles that Raphael always somehow cleaned up. A bounced check here, a failed startup idea there, a car accident he swore wasn't his fault. Raphael would sigh, run a hand through his thinning hair, and then quietly take care of it, usually financially. I saw the pattern, the way Nico's eyes would twinkle just so before he asked for something, the way Raphael would sigh but then always open his wallet. I'd stand by, a knot in my stomach, biting back the urge to say something, anything, about the blatant exploitation I was witnessing. But I'd swallow it down, forcing a polite smile, because I didn't want to be the difficult one, the outsider who criticized his family. I just tried to fit in, to keep the peace in our little family unit, a task that felt increasingly like walking on eggshells. I'd listen to his relatives' endless stories, nod along during their boisterous Sunday lunches, and offer help whenever I could, all while feeling like an observer rather than a full participant. I was so focused on being the good wife, the understanding step-aunt, the one who never caused trouble, that I never saw the precariousness of my own position. I thought my place was secure, earned through years of quiet support and unspoken sacrifices. God, was I naive. I never imagined how easily I could be thrown out of it, how quickly my entire world could crumble because of the very people I was trying so hard to appease. Looking back, Reddit, it's like there were always these subtle signs, these tiny, almost imperceptible cracks forming in what I desperately wanted to believe was a solid foundation. Nicholas had this way about him, you know? It wasn't overt, not at first, but those lingering looks when we were alone. They always made me a little uncomfortable, sending a weird, cold shiver down my spine. I remember one time, Raphael was out running errands, and Nico had stopped by to borrow some tools, which, surprise, surprise, he never returned. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters after lunch, the afternoon sun streaming in, making dust motes dance in the air. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me. Just watching. No words, no smile, just this intense, unblinking stare that felt like it was drilling into me. My hand paused, the damp cloth suddenly feeling heavy. My stomach clenched, and a prickle of goosebumps ran up my arms despite the warmth. I tried to just ignore it, focusing intently on a smudge that wasn't really there, but I could feel his eyes on me, heavy and possessive. When I finally turned, forcing a polite, slightly strained smile, he just blinked slowly, a faint smirk playing on his lips, and then, as if nothing had happened, asked, "Raphael's not home yet, is he?" The air felt thick, suffocating. I just shook my head, my voice catching slightly, and he eventually sauntered off, leaving me standing there, heart thumping a little too fast, the pleasant quiet of the house suddenly feeling menacing. I'd always dismissed it, telling myself it was just immaturity. He was 22, still a kid in many ways. Maybe he just didn't know how to interact with an older woman, his uncle's wife. Or maybe I was just being paranoid, overthinking things, projecting my own insecurities. I'd chalk it up to cultural differences, to the relaxed way people in Argentina sometimes interact, even though deep down, I knew it wasn't that. It was different. It felt predatory. But for the sake of family harmony, for the sake of not being the one who causes problems, I kept my mouth shut. I never wanted to rock the boat, especially when it came to Raphael and his deep, deep loyalty to his relatives. Nico was his golden boy, after all, despite his string of minor troubles that Raphael always somehow cleaned up. Every time Nico messed up, Raphael would get this weary look, this resigned sigh, but then he'd just fix it. A forgotten bill, a small debt, a car fender bender that was definitely the other guy's fault. Raphael would always swoop in, pay the piper, and Nico would emerge unscathed, flashing that charming, dimpled smile, promising he'd learned his lesson this time. And Raphael would believe him every single time. It was an endless cycle, and it made me feel invisible, like my quiet observations, my gut feelings, were irrelevant. How could I bring up something as nebulous as lingering looks when Raphael was so invested in Nico's perfection? I pictured the conversation in my head 1,000 times. "Miriam, you're imagining things. He's just a boy. You're being unfair." I couldn't bear the thought of being seen as critical, as the bad guy who dared to question his beloved nephew. My silence, born from a desire for peace, from a desperate need to be accepted into this tight-knit family, ended up being twisted into something sinister. It became my vulnerability, a weapon they would later exploit against me. Every time I bit my tongue, every uncomfortable glance I pretended not to notice, every time I rationalized his behavior away, I was inadvertently building the cage they'd eventually trap me in. I thought I was protecting our peace, protecting my marriage. Instead, I was just making myself an easier target, silencing the alarm bells that were ringing louder and louder inside my own head. The discomfort festered, a slow-burning anxiety that I tried to bury under layers of polite smiles and forced normalcy. God, I wish I had just spoken up. I wish I had screamed. The night it all blew up started like any other evening. I remember it so clearly, every mundane detail etched into my brain like a scar. I had just finished grading a stack of essays, the red ink a familiar slash across the pages, and was making a simple Milanese for dinner, the smell of frying meat and warm breadcrumbs filling the kitchen. The radio was playing some old tango, quiet and comforting, and the last sliver of twilight was fading beyond the kitchen window, painting the sky in hues of deep violet and orange. I was tired, but content, looking forward to a quiet meal with Raphael, maybe a cup of tea on the patio afterward. A perfectly normal Tuesday. Then I heard the key turn in the lock, sharper than usual. And the front door didn't just open. It slammed against the wall with a force that rattled the frames. My heart jumped into my throat. I turned, startled, a half-cooked Milanese still in my hand, dripping oil onto the counter. Raphael stood there, framed in the doorway, but it wasn't my Raphael. His face was beet red, contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage I'd rarely, if ever, seen directed at me. His eyes, usually warm and tired after a day's work, were narrowed slits, burning with something cold and accusing. The air instantly thickened, heavy with menace, silencing the radio, the sizzle of the pan, even the crickets outside. It felt like the entire house held its breath. Before I could even ask what was wrong, before I could offer a "Hola, mi amor," he was on me. He didn't grab my arm gently or even speak. He just pulled me from the kitchen, his grip surprisingly strong and rough, dragging me into the living room as if I were a rag doll. My shoes were still by the door, my apron still on, the dinner still cooking on the stove, but he didn't care. He didn't even notice. He just propelled me forward, his anger a palpable force field around him. "You ruined Nico's life," he spat, the words dripping with venom, hitting me like physical blows. His voice was hoarse, unfamiliar. He waved a stack of printed papers right in my face, so close I could smell the fresh ink. My eyes unfocused, trying to make sense of the blurry text, the unfamiliar chat interface. It was a supposed WhatsApp conversation only. It wasn't mine. It couldn't be. My mind scrambled, trying to grasp what I was seeing. And then I saw Nico. He was standing by the bookshelf, hunched over, his shoulders shaking, his face buried in his hands. He was supposedly crying. Crying. My stomach dropped, a cold, sickening lurch. Raphael shoved the papers closer, forcing me to focus. The screenshots showed a chat, where I was supposedly demanding money in exchange for not telling on Nico for some favor I'd allegedly done him. The words were vile, crude, suggesting some kind of sexual proposition, followed by a demand for payment to keep quiet. My name, my actual name, Miriam, was at the top of the chat bubble. "She tried to blackmail me, Tio," Nico choked out, his voice thick with fake tears, his body racked with sobs that sounded just a little too performative. After I politely rejected her advances. She said she'd tell you everything if I didn't pay her. He lifted his head, and his eyes, red-rimmed and watery, met mine for a fleeting second, and in that instant, beneath the feigned distress, I saw a flicker of something cold, triumphant, a smirk that was gone before Raphael could catch it. My breath hitched. My jaw went slack. The blood drained from my face, leaving me feeling hollow and lightheaded. Blackmail? Advances? The sheer audacity, the sickening inversion of the truth. My lingering discomfort, my swallowed anxieties, the times I'd felt his eyes on me, all of it twisted into this monstrous lie where I was the aggressor, the predator. My mind was reeling, trying to connect this absurd, nightmarish scene to my quiet, normal life just moments before. My tongue felt thick, glued to the roof of my mouth. I wanted to scream, to laugh, to point out the blatant fabrication, but no sound came out. It was too fast, too much, too unbelievable. Before I could even process what was happening, before I could utter a single word in my defense, a heavy, dark blue suitcase appeared as if from nowhere. Raphael shoved it into my hands with such force that I nearly stumbled backward. It was my suitcase, the one I used for weekend trips, haphazardly stuffed, bulging at the seams. He must have packed it himself, or had Nico do it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't an argument. This was an execution. His eyes, still blazing with a terrifying fury, met mine one last time, devoid of any recognition, any love, any hesitation. "Get out," he snarled, his voice a low, guttural growl. And then, he just pushed me. A hard, unceremonious shove that sent me reeling through the front door, the heavy suitcase clanking against my leg. I stumbled onto the narrow sidewalk, the cool evening air suddenly feeling like a slap in the face. Before I could even turn, before I could catch my balance or make a sound, the door slammed shut behind me with a resounding thwack, rattling the entire house. The sound echoed in the sudden, eerie silence of the street, a final, brutal punctuation mark on the end of my marriage. He didn't even spare me a second glance, just shut me out, into the growing darkness, alone with the ghosts of a life that had just exploded into a million pieces. I stood there on the quiet street, suitcase beside me, utterly numb. The cool, damp air of the evening bit at my exposed skin, but I felt nothing. It was like my body had gone into shock, every nerve ending screaming into a void. My ears were ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the distant sounds of the neighborhood, the faint murmur of a TV from next door, the distant bark of a dog. All I could hear was the echo of that door slamming shut, a sound that reverberated not just in my ears but deep in my chest, a physical ache, disgusted, humiliated beyond words. My cheeks burned, even though I knew no one had witnessed my public expulsion. The thought of a neighbor peeking through their blinds, seeing me standing there, abandoned, made a fresh wave of nausea roll through me. I just stared at the pale yellow door of my house, the house I had called home for years, the house where I had shared my life with Raphael. It looked so innocent, so welcoming, belying the absolute devastation that had just occurred within its walls. It felt like a cruel joke. My mind was reeling, a kaleidoscope of fragmented images and words. You ruined Nico's life. Blackmail. Politely rejected my advances. The phrases kept replaying, each one a fresh stab. It was so grotesque, so completely alien to who I was, to anything I had ever done or even contemplated. I had never liked being alone with Nico. Those lingering looks always made me uneasy, sending a shiver of discomfort through me. I'd always brushed them off, told myself I was overreacting, that it was just his youth, his brashness. I had swallowed my discomfort for years, forced polite smiles, manufactured small talk, all for the sake of family peace, for the sake of not creating any ripples in Raphael's carefully constructed world. I had convinced myself that keeping quiet, being the easy one, was the path to belonging, to security. Now, that very silence, that very discomfort I had so meticulously hidden, was being twisted, turned into a narrative where I was the predator, the blackmailer. It was a sick, twisted mockery of my own suppressed feelings. The irony was so bitter it made my mouth taste like ash. He had weaponized my self-restraint, my desperate need for harmony. Part of me, the broken, desperate part, wanted to bang on that door, to beg Raphael to at least listen to me, to explain, to scream that it was all a lie, a monstrous fabrication. My throat ached with unshed tears. My chest felt tight, like an iron band was squeezing the air out of me. I wanted to tell him about the way Nico's eyes would linger, about the little shivers I'd get, about how I always felt a need to put physical distance between us. I wanted to make him see, to make him understand that I would never do such a thing, that his own nephew was manipulating him. I pictured myself on my knees, hands clasped, pleading for an ounce of his trust, a shred of his belief in me. But another, colder part, a part that was rapidly hardening into something sharp and unyielding, knew better. Knew that if he could believe such a monstrous lie so easily, without a single question, without a moment of doubt, without even looking me in the eye and asking for my side of the story, if his trust in his nephew superseded our entire marriage, our shared history, our quiet moments, our supposed love without a second thought, then we were already irrevocably over. There was no going back from that. The speed, the certainty, the sheer brutality of his judgment. It wasn't just about the lie. It was about his fundamental lack of trust in me. He had chosen Nico, his golden boy, over me, his wife, in less than 5 minutes. He had chosen a fabricated screenshot over years of my quiet devotion. The weight of the suitcase in my hand felt symbolic, heavy with the shattered fragments of my life. My legs started to shake, a delayed reaction to the shock. The air grew colder and a shiver finally ran through me, not from the temperature, but from the chilling realization that the man I had built my life with, the man I had loved and supported, had just discarded me like trash. He hadn't just slammed the door on me. He had slammed the door on our entire life together, sealing it shut with a lie he was all too eager to believe. The betrayal wasn't just Nico's, it was Raphael's. And that, more than anything, was the thing that truly broke me. Weeks later, the initial numbing shock had begun to wear off, leaving behind a raw, throbbing ache that settled deep in my bones. I was staying with my best friend Anna in a tiny apartment across town, the one she usually rented out to students. Every morning, I'd wake up in that unfamiliar bed, the ceiling fan whirring above me, and for a split second, I'd forget. Then the memories would flood back. The slam of the door, Raphael's twisted face, Nico's fake tears. It was like living in a constant state of low-grade fever. I'd spend my days staring blankly at the walls, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, replaying every interaction, searching for a clue, a sign I'd missed. Then, the lawyer's letter arrived. It wasn't just any letter. It was official, crisp, with the letterhead of a well-known law firm in Rosario. Anna brought it to me, her face tight with worry. My hands trembled as I tore it open, the paper feeling oddly heavy. I scanned the first few lines, and the world tilted again. Raphael was filing for divorce, but it wasn't just a standard divorce filing. Oh no. The letter, drafted by his lawyer, painted me as emotionally unstable and inappropriate with his nephew, Nicholas. Reading those words, those vile, disgusting accusations laid out in cold, legal language, something inside me flipped. The numbness shattered, replaced by an inferno of pure, searing rage. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was the calculated public defamation. My name, my reputation, my entire existence was being dragged through the mud with these monstrous lies. My vision blurred for a second, not with tears, but with a hot, desperate anger that felt like it was going to consume me whole. Emotionally unstable? Inappropriate? I wanted to scream, to rip the paper into a million pieces and stomp on it. This wasn't just a breakup. This was a character assassination. All my humiliation, all the quiet pain I'd been carrying, hardened into a resolve I didn't know I possessed. It was like a switch had been flicked. If they wanted everything in writing, if they wanted to drag my name through the mud with their disgusting lies, then fine. We would put everything in writing. Every single uncomfortable glance, every stolen moment Nico thought no one saw, every single detail of Raphael's blind loyalty. I wasn't just fighting for a divorce settlement anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, for my very identity. I wouldn't let them erase me with their filth. I knew I couldn't use a lawyer in Rosario. The gossip would be instant. The whispers would follow me everywhere. So, with Anna's help, I found a lawyer in a neighboring town, Santa Fe, a calm, sharp woman named Dr. Elena Ramirez. Her office was modern, understated, far from the stuffy legal firms I imagined. The moment I sat across from her clear, intelligent eyes fixed on mine, I felt a flicker of hope. I poured it all out, the entire sordid story from the normal life to the unsettling looks to the slam of the door. My voice was shaky at first, but as I spoke, recounting the humiliation and the gut-wrenching betrayal, it grew stronger, fueled by the conviction that I was finally being heard. I told her everything, especially about how Nicolas had unfettered access to Raphael's home office, how he'd often borrow Raphael's laptop or use our shared family computer in the living room, how he knew Raphael's passwords, or at least where Raphael kept them written down, because Raphael was notoriously bad with tech. Crucially, I mentioned how Nico had often used WhatsApp Web on our shared computer, leaving it logged in sometimes. Dr. Ramirez listened intently, her face unreadable, occasionally scribbling notes. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy but not uncomfortable. It felt thoughtful. "This changes things," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "It sounds like a fabrication, and we have a strong angle to prove it." She laid out her plan, and it was brilliant. She suggested we subpoena device logs from both my phone and Nico's, if possible. But more importantly, she wanted router data from the house, cloud backups from Raphael's accounts, which Nico might have accessed, and any other digital footprints from the house's shared computer. "If this chat was fabricated, there will be a digital trail," she explained, her eyes gleaming with a quiet determination that mirrored my own. "We can trace the IP address, the timestamps, the device used." A tiny spark ignited within me, a glimmer of light in the suffocating darkness. Of course, Raphael, through his lawyer, absolutely refused to cooperate at first. He dug his heels in, claiming I was dragging the family through the mud and harassing Nico with my irrational demands. His lawyer, a pompous man with a perpetually sneering expression, tried every trick in the book to paint me as vengeful and irrational, a woman scorned, desperate to destroy Raphael's good name. He insisted again and again that Nico had no reason to lie, that he was a good boy who was simply distressed by my unwanted attention. I had to sit silently in hearing after hearing in those sterile, intimidating courtrooms, listening to them describe me like a stranger, a villain in their twisted narrative. Each accusation, each false statement, felt like a fresh wound. My hands would clench under the table, my jaw tight, my nails digging into my palms, trying to keep my composure. It was excruciating. To hear the man I had loved so deeply, the man who had shared my bed and my life for so long, allow these vile lies to be spoken about me without a single word of defense, without a moment of hesitation. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than the initial expulsion. I was just a ghost in the room, a silent scapegoat, while they crafted their story, twisting my quiet nature into something sinister. But with every lie they spun, my resolve only grew stronger. I wouldn't let them win. Not like this. As the legal battles wore on, Reddit, through weeks that blurred into months, there were so many moments I questioned myself. So many times I lay awake in Anna's spare bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, wondering if I was just being vengeful. Was I letting my anger consume me too much? Had I become the bitter, scorned woman they were trying to paint me as? The thought alone made my stomach churn with a mix of fear and self-loathing. I'd always prided myself on being reasonable, on seeking peace, on trying to understand other people's perspectives, even when they hurt me. Now here I was, digging my heels in, demanding investigations, dragging everything into the light, potentially tearing apart Raphael's beloved family. It felt un-Miriam. I had to sit through endless court sessions, each one a fresh assault on my already fractured spirit. The courtroom itself was a sterile, impersonal space, all cold marble and hushed whispers, making my raw emotions feel out of place, inappropriate. The air always smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, a stark contrast to the emotional stench of the lies being flung around. Raphael's lawyer, that smug, sneering man, would stand there, chest puffed out, confidently spouting his garbage, trying to tear me apart piece by agonizing piece. He'd meticulously build his case, casting me as unstable, irrational, a woman whose overactive imagination had led her to concoct wild accusations against a sensitive young man. He'd refer to me as the petitioner, never by my name, dehumanizing me, reducing me to a legal entity with a vendetta. I remember one specific hearing. The fluorescent lights hummed above, making my head ache. Raphael sat across the room, his face carefully blank, avoiding my gaze entirely. Nico wasn't even there, probably off enjoying the fruits of his deception. Raphael's lawyer was droning on about my supposed erratic behavior, twisting every quiet moment I'd spent, every time I'd bitten my tongue for peace, into evidence of my instability. He even brought up a time I'd gently suggested Raphael talk to Nico about his spending habits, framing it as obsessive interference in his nephew's life. He painted me as a manipulative, jealous woman, desperate for attention, and when rejected, resorting to blackmail. It was incredibly, unbearably painful to sit there, silent, my hands clenched in my lap, listening to someone I had loved so deeply, someone who claimed to know me better than anyone, allow such vile lies to be spread about me in a public forum. Raphael just sat there, impassive, letting it all happen. Not once did he interject. Not once did he look at me with even a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Not once did he say, "Wait, that's not Miriam." It was as if the woman they were describing was truly who he believed me to be. And that realization was a deeper cut than any legal accusation. The memory of his face, beet red with fury the night he kicked me out, was nothing compared to the cold indifference he now showed, allowing my character to be publicly assassinated. It felt like he was actively participating in my erasure. I used to believe, truly believe, that love meant always choosing family, always sacrificing for the greater good of the unit. That was Raphael's mantra, and for so long I had adopted it as my own. My needs, my feelings, my discomfort, they were always secondary to the harmony of the family, especially his family. I'd given up so much, compromised so often, all in the name of this unspoken covenant. I thought that by being the accommodating one, the understanding one, I was ensuring my place, building a strong foundation. But as I sat there, day after day in that sterile courtroom, listening to them paint me as a monster, as a deranged woman out for revenge, a profound and horrifying truth dawned on me. I realized that sometimes choosing yourself, fighting for your own dignity, for your own truth, is the only choice you have left when the people you trusted decide you're easier to sacrifice than the lies they cling to. My silence, my desire for peace, had only made me a more convenient scapegoat. They weren't protecting Raphael's family. They were protecting Nico's lies at my expense. And Raphael was complicit. He had made his choice the moment he slammed that door. My fight wasn't just for a fair divorce settlement anymore, though of course, I deserved my share. It had become something much bigger, much more fundamental. It was for my reputation, the good name I had built through years of hard work and honest living. It was for my sanity, to prove to myself and to the world that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't the unstable, manipulative person they were trying to make me out to be. And most of all, it was for the simple, unvarnished truth. The truth that had been buried under layers of convenient lies and blind loyalty. I had to fight, not just for what I was owed, but for who I was. Because if I didn't, they would have successfully erased me, and I would have let them. And that, I knew, I could never live with. The weight in my chest wasn't just sadness anymore. It was a fierce, burning resolve. I had to see this through. For Miriam. The digital expert's report finally came back, and read it was a bombshell. Dr. Ramirez had called me into her office, her usually composed face holding a hint of grim satisfaction. The thick binder she placed on her desk felt like a lead weight, heavy with the power to either exonerate me or condemn me further. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I remember the smell of her office, old books and fresh coffee, and how I gripped the arms of my chair so tightly my knuckles went white. She walked me through it, page by agonizing page, but her voice remained calm, professional, cutting through my swirling anxieties. The blackmail chat hadn't come from my device at all. Not my phone, not my tablet, not any of my computers. It had been meticulously created on a cloned number using a third-party app, right there on Raphael's own home computer. The one in his office, the one Nico so often borrowed or used for quick searches while Raphael was out. The IP address matched, down to the exact evening the messages were supposedly sent. The expert had even found remnants of the third-party app, hastily deleted but recoverable, and the precise timestamps of its use. It wasn't just evidence, it was irrefutable proof, a cold, hard slap in the face of their lies. A wave of nauseating vindication washed over me. The gut-wrenching certainty I'd felt from the beginning, the desperate whispers of my own sanity, were finally being validated. But it was also sickening. To think of Nico sitting in our home, creating that vile story, those disgusting words, while Raphael, my husband, was somewhere else, completely oblivious or willfully blind to the viper he harbored. But the twist, oh God, the twist didn't stop there. Dr. Ramirez, with a slight arch of her eyebrow, then cross-checked the dates and times with Raphael's small business bank statements, which we had finally managed to subpoena after weeks of his lawyer's obstruction and attempts to block access. Nico, dear, sweet, innocent Nico, had been making unauthorized withdrawals from Raphael's account for months. Small amounts at first, then growing larger, draining it slowly, subtly, like a silent, unseen leak. And these withdrawals had started around the same time he suddenly cried, harassment, and blackmail. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. It was a calculated distraction, a smokescreen designed to divert Raphael's attention from the real theft, to make me the villain so no one would look too closely at his precious nephew. My blood ran cold, then boiled with a furious heat. He wasn't just lying. He was stealing and using my reputation as a shield, all while playing the victim. The final divorce hearing felt surreal, a blur of cold metal chairs and hushed whispers. Raphael was there, looking pale and drawn, his lawyer still radiating a smug confidence that made my skin crawl. Nico was there too, sitting a few rows back, trying to blend into the gallery, his face a picture of feigned innocence, occasionally glancing nervously at Raphael. I sat beside Dr. Ramirez, my hands clasped so tightly under the table my fingers ached. My heart was a drum in my chest, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was it, the moment of truth. My lawyer, Dr. Ramirez, stood up, her posture radiating quiet authority. She didn't shout, didn't grandstand. She just calmly, meticulously, presented the digital expert's report. She started with the technical details, the IP address, the device IDs, the timestamps that proved the blackmail chat originated not from my phone, but from Raphael's home computer. She even had a brief clinical demo showing how easy it was to fabricate such a conversation using a third-party app and a cloned number, projecting it onto a screen for the judge to see. The air in the courtroom grew heavy, thick with unspoken tension. Raphael's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, his confident smirk slowly dissolving into a look of bewildered concern. Then, she moved to the bank records. She projected images of Raphael's business account statements, highlighting a series of transfers to Nico's accounts. They were innocently labeled in the bank's system, small sums that, when viewed individually, seemed innocuous. But when stacked together, month after month, they painted a damning picture of sustained financial drain. She pointed out how these withdrawals had commenced before the alleged blackmail attempt. When she ended by saying, her voice clear and precise, "It appears, Your Honor, that the accusation of harassment and blackmail against my client conveniently coincided with the discovery of these unauthorized withdrawals from Mr. Raphael's business accounts." The courtroom went dead silent. You could literally hear a pin drop. The judge, a stern, experienced woman, leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she looked from the screen to Raphael, then to Nico, who had visibly flinched, his face draining of all color. Raphael, sitting across from me, looked like he'd been punched in the gut. His face, already pale, turned a ghastly shade of gray. His eyes, which had avoided mine for months, now snapped to Nico, who was trying to shrink into his seat. The smugness had completely vanished from Raphael's lawyer's face, replaced by a look of utter horror. I watched Raphael's slow, dawning horror, the realization spreading across his features like a poison. His mouth fell open slightly, his breath catching in his throat. He whispered, barely audible, his voice choked with disbelief, "Nico, what did you do?" It wasn't a question, but a plea. A shattered man confronting the ruins of his carefully constructed reality. Nico, for the first time, looked genuinely terrified, not tearful but desperate, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal, looking for an escape. The judge, her expression unreadable, cleared her throat. She dismissed all accusations against me with prejudice, agreed that I'd been defamed, and immediately ordered an investigation into potential fraud by Nicolas. She also ordered a full audit of Raphael's business accounts, given the clear evidence of unauthorized transactions. Raphael not only lost face in front of the entire court, enduring the stares and whispers of those present, but also ended up facing serious tax trouble due to the undocumented withdrawals and a frozen business account, while authorities dug through his books. His family-first mantra had literally bankrupted him, all because he chose to believe a thief over his wife. I walked away with my full share of the house sale, a formal retraction of the vile accusations, and the bitter satisfaction of watching Raphael realize the person he'd thrown me away for was the one who'd actually been stealing from him and destroying his life. The irony was a cold, hard lump in my chest, heavy with the weight of all those years I'd swallowed my discomfort, all those times I'd given him the benefit of the doubt. He had sacrificed me, his marriage, his peace, for his golden boy, and that boy had repaid him by taking everything. Reddit, I didn't destroy Raphael's life. He handed it to someone who'd already started tearing it apart from the inside. He made the choice to believe a lie, to discard me without a second thought, without a single question. But now, after all of this, after seeing the devastation, the shattered look on his face, I still wonder, Aida, for exposing everything, even if it meant tearing apart the family he held so dear, simply to prove my own innocence. Was I wrong to fight so hard for the truth, knowing the utter devastation it would cause? Or was it just simple justice for choosing himself and his nephew's lies over me? My heart is a mess of conflicting emotions, and I just don't know anymore.